I'm covered in mosquito bites. So today we are gonna make a beef stew. I really like beef stew. It's really good in the winter time, but it's not winter right now. It's actually the end of summer. Still, really tasty, really good, and so filling. So let's actually make this. Today we're gonna make a beef stew with carrots, because I like those. So what do you need? You need beef. You're going to need about 3 pounds worth of beef. I don't buy like the pre-cut up stewing beefs with chunks of beef, because I don't like it. I'd rather take the whole thing like this and cut it up myself. I get the bone in it, so it's a little bit cheaper, and I get to take the bones and I can make beef stock with it later on. Still, I have 3 pounds of it right here, and I need to cut those up. But before I start cutting them, what I need to do is take this guy right here, and I need some paper towels. The thing is, with this beef, it looks a little wet, it feels a little wet, and I need to dry it out just a little bit. So I'm gonna take some paper towels, I'm gonna lay them down just on this pan, and I set my oven to 325. They're not gonna sit in there and cook, but I'm gonna use that heat to kind of draw out moisture and kind of dry them out a little bit. Okay, so we need to actually cut up this meat. Oh, so for these bones, I said I'd make beef stock out of them. I'm not making the beef stock today, so I'm gonna put them in the freezer. Now these are the bones that I had from last time I made stew. I hadn't had a chance to go and make stock out of them, but I'm just gonna throw the bones in there for now. And then when I get a chance to make beef stock, I'm just gonna use all of these. Okay, so I have finished cutting all of this up. I just need to arrange this meat in a single layer on this sheet. When it comes to the actual meat you're gonna get, you need to get something, if you're gonna stew it, with a lot of connective tissue in it. What that means is that it's gotta be rough. It's gotta be the kind of meat you wouldn't want to eat as a steak. So don't use steak meat. You'll get a really crappy stew. You want something that's just like really tough, with a lot of tissue in it, a lot of fat in it. And that's because we gotta stew this for hours and hours and hours, let the connective tissue kind of break down, release all of that delicious gelatin. That's what it is. Into the actual stock, let it kind of sit around, let the meat really break down so that it just falls apart, tender. Okay, that's good. If you had really wet meat, like it had been just thawed or something and there was a lot of water on top of it, I would take another paper towel and just pat it down really nicely before putting it in the oven. But I'm all set. This is gonna go into my oven for 10 minutes. No more than that, otherwise it's gonna start cooking and that's not what I really want. Thanks. Okay, so meat is in the oven. That's gonna sit for just a little bit. Here's the game plan. So what we need to do is take the meat and we need to brown it. I want it to have like a nice crispy outside, but I'm not gonna cook it all the way through. I'm gonna use a little bit of oil and just let it brown and keep that on the side. Then I'm gonna take some vegetables, my aromatics, like carrots and celery and onions, and I'm gonna kind of start with those flavors and kind of keep them in the fat, move it around a little bit. And then I'm gonna deglaze it using some wine. Then I'm gonna add in the chicken stock, and then I'm gonna add in the beef. I'm gonna throw the whole thing in the oven, and then we're gonna let it stew for like 3 hours. But that's the game plan. So that means we need to start peeling vegetables. So, like a lot of recipes, I'm gonna start with celery, carrots, and onion, and I'm gonna put that all into my pan once my meat has finished browning. I know, I need a vegetable peeler.
Oh.
So, how many carrots and celery do you actually need? Because I'm just starting to build the base, I don't want to actually throw in a ton of carrots to eat. It's just to start flavors going. So I'm going to start with 3 really, really small carrots, or 2 medium-sized carrots if you have that. I'm going to start with 1 really large stalk of celery, or 2 kind of medium stalks, depending on what you have. And then I'm going to use probably the whole onion, just because that's what I like. I made a mess everywhere. Okay, so all of my veggies are now cut up, and you can see I diced them really, really fine. This is what I want. I don't want big chunks because, like I said, I'm just building flavor right now. And I just need that to have as much surface area as possible to kind of bring it all out. My oven has beeped, which means I get to take out that beef. It had a chance to kind of dry out, some of the moisture came out, evaporated. But now I need to brown it. So, take your heaviest pan, and this is the one that you're gonna do your stewing in. Grab that, you're gonna start with the heat. It's something pretty high, like medium high, something. Because we wanna brown this, we wanna brown it really, really fast, and we don't wanna finish cooking it. My oil for today is gonna be grapeseed oil, because this is one of those oils that has a really high smoke point. So I'm gonna use some of that, not a whole lot of it. If I run out later on, then I am going to use an extra teaspoon or so, just to make sure that nothing kind of dries out. Okay, so my pan is now fully heated. It's screaming hot, which is what I want. I'm gonna grab my tongs, and I need to work in batches. I'm gonna take this meat here, put it in the pan, and let it brown on 3 or 4 sides of it at least, and I gotta work fast. But one thing I forgot, can you grab me one of those giant metal bowls? It's okay. Meat's gonna go in there. It's gonna take about 5 to 10 minutes for a batch. Then it's gonna go in this metal bowl, and I'm gonna collect all of the meat and all of the juice that comes out of it. I'm gonna use that juice later on. If you don't have a splatter guard, really think about buying one. Because if you don't have one, you get to clean up the whole kitchen when you're done with this. So, I don't know if you can see that, but this is what the meat should look like when you're about flipping it over. Nice and brown and crispy and crusty. That's how I want. That's like that good crust that a steak has. And I want that flavor in my stew because it's so good. So, why am I working in batches? Why don't I just take all this meat and just kind of throw it in like 2 or 3 batches and just fill it up and just let it cook down? The reason is, if you did that, the meat would have to kind of touch each other and pile on top of each other. And if you do that, it's not going to be in direct contact with the pan heat. So you're not going to get a nice brown crust like you normally would. It would kind of steam itself because all the water would escape it and go directly into the piece of meat beside it. And you get steamed meat, which, though good, is not what I want for this stew. It smells so good. Okay, so all my meat has now been browned, so you probably cannot see that from there, or maybe you can, but you can see that it's nice and brown, and you can't see it, but there's a lot of juice kind of collected at the bottom. I know that if I keep it in that bowl, a lot of the crust is going to dissolve, but it's going to be put into that juice, which I am going to add to my stew later on, so kind of all the flavors are being kept. Now, my pan looks really gross. In fact, it looks like this. And it looks pretty bad. It looks all black and gross, but don't worry, because my aromatics have a ton of water in them. So even though it's really black and gross, the water's gonna come out of the vegetables and actually start to lift it up off of my pan. You just have to trust me on this. When you first do this, it looks like it's not gonna work, but you gotta trust me. Okay, so that has to kind of sweat out, which is the culinary term for letting all the water kind of come out of the vegetables. So that just has to go. But while that's going, I'm gonna add in the flavor accents. Stuff that I think tastes delicious, and I'm gonna put in my stew. So, surprise, surprise, I'm gonna use garlic. I'm gonna use 3 cloves of garlic, because I feel like that's appropriate for today. And on my quest to try new and exciting food, today I picked up green onions, which I actually really love. I've had them a lot when I was a kid. And I didn't like them as a kid, but I love them as a not kid. So it's pretty good. Awesome. So my aromatics are pretty much done. I'm gonna add in the flavor accents, the garlic and the green onion. What other flavor accents could you use? You could use ginger. Ginger would be really nice. I say cinnamon a lot. I think cinnamons are really good accents. Bay leaves. Any kind of herb or spice that you think is really, really flavorful, that you think would be good in a stew, just go with it, because with the meat and the stock and everything, it's always gonna taste really, really good. You don't have to really worry about pairing stuff. That's gonna go for about another minute or so, but there's still a lot of black, brown bits at the bottom. So my vegetables have pretty much given all the water they're going to, and it has lifted it off the pan just a little bit, but I need to deglaze it. So to deglaze it, I either need to use water or something else to make all that stuff dissolve. And water's great, but wine is even better. So this wine right here is really fruity. I might use this. But this red is a lot more bold. I'm liking this. This is a Baco Noir that I found beside my computer because I didn't finish it during one of my video game nights. Anyways, you need about a cup or so of it. And now I'm just gonna use my spatula and I'm just gonna lift all that brown bits, all the fond, which is what the French call it, off the bottom of my pan, and that's gonna be really, really nice. Okay, so let's recap. We have browned the meat, we have done our aromatics, we've added our flavor accent, we've deglazed. That needs to go a little bit more. We're gonna add in the actual stew stock, and then we're almost done, which I think is really awesome. You're probably noticing by now that this is a really lengthy recipe. In fact, I've been cooking for about almost an hour and a bit. And yeah, it does take that long. This is what I do on like a really nice, lazy Sunday, because I really like just cooking here. It doesn't require a lot of work, I just have to work at it, which is nice. So the deglazing is almost done, but I need my stock. So luckily I have stock from last time, just sitting in my freezer. This, if I remember, was 2 cups, it might be 3 cups, but it's actually really good. What I want in total at this stew is about 5 cups of liquid. So I've added 1 cup of wine. I'm gonna add 1.5 cups of water because water is really good to have in a stew. Because if you've had my stock before, you would find that it's actually really strong tasting. So we're gonna use 1.5 cups of water and then 2.5 cups of stock. I'm using chicken stock. You could use beef stock, and if you didn't make it at home, you can use store-bought. But make it at home. It's better. I almost forgot, salt and pepper. So at this point in the game, I want to kind of salt my veggies I don't think I'm gonna add any more salt or pepper after that. After I finish making the stew, I'm gonna let my guests decide how much salt or pepper they want to add to it. Usually my stock has enough salt in it as it is. So, okay, so I've taken my stock out of the microwave, and in this I have about 2 cups of stock. Now I want 5 in total, so now I'm gonna have to use 2 full cups of water. My tap water tastes fine. If yours doesn't, use a filter. When you first do that, it's gonna look like it's not enough liquid for your stew, but trust me, we're gonna add a lot. We're gonna add all of the meat to it, 3 pounds worth of meat, a whole bunch of veggies. We need the space in there for everything just to kind of sit together. So kick up the heat, let it come to a boil, and then once it boils, we'll keep going. So looks like the stock is coming just right up to that boiling point. So I'm gonna take the rest of this meat that I've all browned up, and I'm gonna just add it right into it. It's really important that if there's any juice left over in this pan, this pot, this bowl, you add it to the stock. Really important. Okay, so I'm gonna let that come to a boil again, but then after it does, we have to think about how we're actually going to stew it. Now I could stew it on the stovetop, that would work, but the problem is the source of heat's right from the bottom. So if I have a piece of meat at the top, it's always gonna be at a colder temperature than the stuff at the bottom. And because my pot's so full of vegetables and meat, chances are that meat's never gonna come back to the bottom. So what's a better way of doing this? Put the whole thing into your oven. So I set my oven to 350. That way, all the heat is going to attack our stew from all different sides. So I'm not gonna run into the problem of having cold spots in there. Basically, the whole thing is going to stew at the same temperature. Okay, so as that comes to a boil, we have to talk about one last thing that stews have to have, and those are the vegetables. Because right now, even though my stew looks great, it's just meat and water, which, though good, is lacking something. So usually I add carrots to mine. In fact, for this stew, I'm only gonna add carrots to mine. And that's because it makes it a lot like a Vietnamese dish called bò kho, where it's just beef stock with carrots in it. Except instead of using soy sauce, I use chicken stock and I use aromatics to kind of bring together all those flavors. Other vegetables you could use little potatoes if you eat potatoes. Parsnips I tried one time. Parsnips were actually pretty nice. They were interesting. Celery, if you like big chunks of celery. I don't really like it in my stew. Squash, depending on how sweet you want your stew to be, squash would be really good. Oh, and you could also try shallots, like a whole shallot that you just put in there, depending on how much you like that flavor. But for me, it's gotta be carrots. So the last thing you wanna do is not add enough vegetables to it. So I'm gonna add in probably these many carrots. Keep in mind that I'm only adding carrots. So if you're adding parsnips or squash, make sure that you have enough vegetables in total. So if I had to guess, I think that's gonna be about 3 cups. I want it closer to about 4 cups. 4 cups of veggies. So I gotta start peeling these. Okay, so my pot has now come to a boil. So heat gets turned off. Get that out of the way. Now I don't want to just put my lid right over top of it, because what's going to happen is a lot of that water is going to escape, and I don't want that. I want to make sure everything has enough water so it can stew properly. So here's a little trick. So this is parchment paper. Take some parchment paper and then crumple it up. Just makes it easier to handle. Put that on top. Put your lid on nice and solid. Now all the moisture pretty much is sealed in. I mean, a little bit's going to get out and you can't really avoid that, but this is a lot better than just putting the lid right on top of it. So for this stew, I'm going to let the beef stew for about an hour and a half before I even take a look at it. That hour and a half is going to give it time for all the proteins and all the fat and everything to kind of just release itself into the stew to make it really, really thick and really nice. That gives me a chance to peel these vegetables and, I don't know, read a book or something. Okay, so it's been an hour and it smells so good, but it's not done yet because I gotta add all of these carrots to it. So when you do this, be super careful because this stew is really, really hot. So just kind of do your best to kind of stir it around once they get in there. I'm gonna put the parchment paper back on top, just like that. All right, so those veggies go in there and they need to be in there for about another hour and a half. So in total, I want about 2 to 3 hours of cooking time. So I'm just gonna take this, bump that right up, and I will see you in a bit, and then we get to eat this finally. It's been 3 hours. I'm so hungry, but my stew's finally done. So, grab the trivet, and I pull this out really carefully. When you do this, be really careful, because it's going to be really, really heavy.
You want me to
here it is.
cover with the camera?
No, I got it. So, grab a ladle. Oh, smells so good. And this, oh, I don't know if you can see that. This is what it looks like. It is hearty, it is tasty, smells so good. And even though this is a really small bowl, this is maybe like a cup of it, this will fill you up. Just the broth and the meat and the carrots, oh, it's just so hearty and so good. The best part about this is that this stew will actually taste better tomorrow. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have my fill of it now. Then I'm gonna take the rest, put it in Tupperware containers, throw it in the fridge. Tomorrow I'll probably eat it again because it's better the next day. And then the rest stays in my freezer. And it stays in my freezer for up to a month, 2 months or so. And whenever I get hungry, I can just eat it. It's really, really fast, really, really simple. So that's it for this recipe. Nutritional information right here. Yeah, all that stuff. But that's it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, stuff you want to tell me, do social networking and find me, because I'm available like that. Bye. Hey YouTube, what is up? Thank you for watching my video. If you want to see me cook more food that you have to watch me cook and then you can't eat because it's the internet and it doesn't work that way yet, subscribe. And if you want to see me cook something in particular, leave something in the comments and I will look at it and consider it and maybe cook it. Maybe.